The sea, vast, merciless, and eternal. For centuries it has tested the strength of every empire, every navy, and every man who dared to command its waves. But during World War II it became more than just water. It became a battlefield. A place where steel giants clashed, where a single ship could decide the fate of nations. Amid this chaos, one warship rose above all others, a floating fortress unlike anything the world had seen before. A vessel so powerful, so advanced, and so feared that even the enemy whispered its name with a mix of awe and dread. It wasn't the largest ship ever built, nor the most beautiful, but it was the most dangerous. Its guns could shatter mountains. Its armor could shrug off fire that would sink anything else. And its speed defied expectations for a ship its size. It was America's ultimate answer to tyranny. A weapon built not just with steel, but with purpose. In the early 1940s, the U.S. Navy needed something extraordinary. The war in the Pacific was raging, and Japan's Imperial Navy ruled with ruthless precision. Battleships burned, fleets vanished beneath waves, and every sunrise brought another desperate fight for survival. The balance of power was slipping, until America unveiled its secret, a warship designed to dominate the seas. No matter the odds, the men who served aboard it would later say it felt alive, as if the ship itself had a soul. Its massive guns could fire shells the size of small cars across miles of open ocean, turning enemy vessels into blazing wrecks before they even saw where the attack came from. Its radar eyes could pierce through fog and darkness, tracking targets with near supernatural accuracy. But what truly made it dangerous wasn't just its weapons, it was the spirit behind it. The American determination to innovate, adapt, and overcome. Every bolt, every turbine, every shell told a story of a nation that refused to be defeated. This was no ordinary ship. It was a message, sent across the sea in thunder and flame. And soon, the world would learn its name. When World War II erupted, the world's oceans turned into graveyards. Battles weren't fought just on land or in the skies. They were fought in the deep, cold waters that connected continents and empires. Whoever controlled the seas controlled the war. By 1941, the United States found itself staring into the abyss. Across the Pacific, Japan's navy moved like a tidal wave, fast, disciplined, and devastating. Their carriers struck with surgical precision, their battleships dominated the horizon, and their submarines prowled like sharks beneath the waves. Then came Pearl Harbor. In just 2 hours, the illusion of safety shattered. Battleships burned, smoke filled the Hawaiian sky, and the pride of the U.S. Pacific Fleet sank to the ocean floor. The attack wasn't just a military blow, it was a message. America's era of comfort was over. In Washington, panic turned to purpose. The nation that had been caught off guard began to move with terrifying speed. Factories that once built cars now forged guns, armor plates, and engines. Entire cities became production lines, and men and women worked day and night to turn steel and fire into hope. The U.S. Navy knew it needed a weapon, not just to fight back, but to dominate. The seas were ruled by monsters, Japan's Yamato-class battleships, Germany's U-boats, and Britain's Royal Navy holding the Atlantic. If America wanted to stand equal, or superior, it had to create something unmatched in power, technology, and resilience. And so, deep within the naval design bureaus, a new vision took shape. A warship that could outrun anything that threatened it, outgun anything that challenged it, and outlast any storm, any battle, any war. It wouldn't be easy. Every bolt of armor added weight. Every inch of speed demanded more power. Every new weapon required new technology. But necessity breeds innovation. And in that crucible of desperation and genius, America's most dangerous warship began to take form. The Navy wanted a ship that could operate independently, capable of both attack and defense. It had to escort carriers, bombard enemy shores, and hunt down surface fleets. It needed to be the embodiment of American engineering might, a perfect blend of speed, firepower, and protection. In 1942, design teams at the New York Naval Shipyard and Brooklyn Navy Yard worked in secrecy and silence. Engineers huddled over blueprints, pencils scratching across paper that would soon become 45,000 tons of floating dominance. In those rooms, history was being drawn line by line, rivet by rivet. Meanwhile, out in the Pacific, Sailors fought desperate battles to hold the line. Coral Sea, Midway, Guadalcanal, proving that air power was rewriting the rules of war. But while carriers captured headlines, the Navy knew that the backbone of sea control still rested with heavy artillery, the kind that could rain fire from miles away and take a beating without breaking. Thus began the birth of a ship that would become both Guardian and Avenger, a warship that could sail thousands of miles, deliver unimaginable destruction, and return home without a scratch. Was more than a response to Pearl Harbor. It was a declaration de promise that America would never again be caught unprepared. Every plate of steel laid down was an act of defiance. Every rivet hammered was an oath to the fallen, and every spark that flew from those shipyards was the light of a rising giant from the ashes of surprise and tragedy. A new kind of power was being born, a warship destined to turn the tides of war, to bring fear to its enemies and hope to its allies. The world had entered a new era of naval warfare, and the ocean was about to meet its most dangerous predator. From the shipyards of Brooklyn to the docks of Norfolk, the air was thick with the rhythm of hammers, the hiss of molten steel, and the roar of welding torches. America was building something extraordinary, a warship that would change the course of naval warfare forever. Its name was USS Iowa, the first of a new breed of battleships, engineered to dominate both sea and sky. She wasn't just built, she was forged, born from blueprints drawn in desperation and perfected by genius. At 887 feet long and weighing over 45,000 tons, the Iowa was a floating fortress, sleek, menacing, and alive with power. Her hull, carved with precision, could slice through the Pacific at speeds exceeding 33 knots, faster than any battleship before her. She could chase down cruisers, evade submarines, and keep pace with aircraft carriers, an almost impossible feat for a ship of her size. But speed was only the beginning. The Iowa was built around 3 colossal 16-inch Mark VII naval guns, each capable of firing a 2,700-pound shell over 20 miles. To grasp that power, imagine launching a small car, filled with explosives, across an entire city, and hitting your target with deadly accuracy. Each turret alone weighed more than an entire destroyer. When those guns fired, the entire ship trembled, the sea itself rippled, and enemy hearts sank. Her secondary battery of 5-inch dual-purpose guns guarded her from aircraft and smaller ships, while dozens of anti-aircraft cannons created a dome of fire no enemy pilot dared to enter. Every inch of the Iowa screamed dominance. She could fight above, across and below the horizon. Inside her armored citadel, the crew lived in a world of noise, vibration, and precision. Nearly 2,800 men operated her, engineers, gunners, navigators, and radar specialists, each a vital part of the living machine. Her armor belt, up to 12 inches thick, could absorb direct hits from most enemy guns. Her radar systems could detect threats long before they appeared on the horizon. In an age when many ships still fought by sight, the Iowa could see through darkness, smoke, and chaos. But what truly made her deadly wasn't just the hardware, it was the philosophy behind her. She was built on a new idea, that technology and adaptability could outmatch brute force. While Japan relied on sheer mass and armor, America invested in intelligence, radar targeting, advanced fire control, and engine design that allowed precision at unprecedented ranges. The Iowa class was proof that war was evolving. These ships were not just floating guns, they were moving command centers, capable of coordinating airstrikes, shore bombardments, and fleet operations all at once. They could operate as lone predators or as the steel guardians of carrier groups. As the USS Iowa prepared for her first voyage, sailors and engineers stood in silence, gazing at the massive guns pointed skyward. They knew they weren't just launching a ship, they were launching a statement. This was the embodiment of American might, speed that no enemy could match, armor that no weapon could penetrate, and firepower that no fleet could withstand. Every test, every sea trial proved it. The USS Iowa wasn't just another battleship. She was something entirely new, a super battleship, engineered with such precision and foresight that she would remain relevant for decades. And as the final coat of gray paint dried under the setting sun, one thing became clear. The world's oceans had a new ruler. The most dangerous warship ever built was ready to make history. February 1943. The Pacific Ocean was still burning. The war had entered its deadliest phase, and the Allies were fighting to reclaim every inch of ocean they had lost. In the midst of that chaos, a new sound began to echo across the waves. The deep, thunderous heartbeat of the USS Iowa, now fully armed, crewed, and ready for war. Her maiden mission wasn't just a test, it was a declaration. The Iowa's first task was to escort critical convoys across hostile waters, protecting carriers and transports that carried the lifeblood of the Allied war effort. Enemy submarines lurked beneath, waiting for an opening, but none came. The Iowa's radar-guided guns and sonar systems made her a nightmare for any would-be attacker. By late 1943, she joined Task Force 38, the U.S. Navy's fast carrier fleet, a mobile strike arm that brought the war to Japan's doorstep. Here the Iowa began to show her true nature, not just a defender, but a hunter. Her first combat operations took place during the Marshall Islands campaign, where she unleashed her 16-inch guns in a terrifying display of firepower. The sea shook. Shells the weight of trucks screamed through the air, slamming into enemy strongholds and turning entire positions into smoke and dust. Observers on nearby ships said it was like watching thunder made visible. For the crew, it was a mix of awe and terror. Each gun blast felt like an earthquake, the shockwave rolling through steel decks and into their bones. But with each volley, their confidence grew. They were part of something unstoppable. The Iowa didn't just deliver destruction, she coordinated it. Her advanced radar fire control system allowed her to hit targets beyond visual range, long before the enemy even knew she was there. In a world where battles were often decided by who fired first, that advantage was priceless. In 1943, the Iowa received a mission unlike any other, to serve as President Franklin D. Roosevelt's personal transport to the Tehran Conference, where he would meet Churchill and Stalin. The president's quarters were built inside the ship, a symbol of trust in her strength and safety. The voyage across the Atlantic was dangerous, with German U-boats prowling in packs, but the Iowa's vigilance never wavered. She delivered Roosevelt safely, a mission that quietly underscored her reputation. If the President of the United States could trust his life to her, what could the enemy possibly do to stop her? Soon after, the Iowa returned to the Pacific, this time to bring retribution. In 1944, she supported the invasions of Kwajalein, Eniwetok, and Truk Lagoon, hammering Japanese defenses into rubble. During the attack on Truk, Japan's so-called Gibraltar of the Pacific, the Iowa's guns pounded airfields, fuel depots, and harbor installations. Entire islands vanished under her bombardment. Japanese pilots who dared to approach her were met by walls of flak and tracer fire. Her anti-aircraft batteries turned the skies into chaos. Dozens of enemy planes torn apart before they could come within striking distance. Word spread quickly among Allied fleets and enemy scouts alike. A new giant roamed the Pacific. Fast, untouchable, and devastating, the USS Iowa had tasted battle, and she was hungry for more. By the end of 1944, her logbooks read like a trail of destruction. Every campaign she touched ended with the same result: victory. She wasn't just part of the fleet anymore. She was the fleet, its spearhead, its shield, and its symbol of power. The enemy had their super battleships, the massive Yamato and Musashi, but the Iowa proved that power wasn't just about size. It was about precision, speed, and the will to fight. The ocean had found its apex predator, and with every battle she entered, the legend of the world's most dangerous warship grew louder, one thunderclap at a time. By mid-1944, the USS Iowa had become more than a warship. She was a storm-given steel form. Every battle she fought turned into a legend. Every appearance on the horizon sent a silent message: run or be destroyed. The Pacific was now her hunting ground. From the Philippines to the Marianas, her shadow stretched across thousands of miles of ocean. Her radar system scanned endlessly, her guns trained and ready, always watching, always waiting. To the men aboard her, it felt as if the ship herself was alive, breathing through the vibration of her engines. whispering through the groan of her turrets. The Iowa wasn't designed to hide. She was built to dominate. In the age of aircraft carriers and submarines, battleships were supposed to be fading relics of an older war, but the Iowa proved them wrong. She was fast enough to keep pace with carriers, strong enough to shrug off torpedoes, and powerful enough to level entire coastlines. Her 16-inch Mark 7 guns were her voice, and when she spoke, the world listened. Each salvo launched projectiles weighing over a ton, traveling up to 23 miles at nearly 2,500 feet per second. When they struck, the explosions could be seen from the horizon. Enemy ships caught within range had no chance to reply. Most never even saw her. The Japanese Navy soon learned to fear that sound, the low, distant thunder that meant death was coming. Reports described entire squadrons retreating once they realized the Iowa was part of the approaching task force. Even the legendary Yamato-class battleships, the pride of Japan, were cautious. They were bigger, yes, but not faster, not smarter, and not as accurate. In 1944 and early 1945, Iowa's guns roared in some of the most decisive campaigns of the Pacific War: Leyte Gulf, the Philippines, and Okinawa. She bombarded shore defenses, silenced artillery, and provided fire support for amphibious landings. Each operation revealed a new side of her: endurance, precision, and an almost supernatural resilience. There were moments when entire skies filled with kamikazes, suicide planes diving straight toward her decks. Crews raced to man anti-aircraft guns, tracer rounds cutting through the air like fiery rain. The Iowa's AA batteries filled the sky with lead, tearing incoming planes apart before they could reach her. In one battle, she shot down over a dozen attackers in a single day, her gunners fighting until their hands blistered and their ears rang for hours. And yet, through all of it, she survived. Not a single bomb or torpedo managed to sink her. Not one mission failed. The sailors aboard her began to believe she was untouchable, blessed. Even, they gave her nicknames: the Gray Ghost of the Pacific, the Sea's Punisher, and simply, the Big Stick. What made her even more feared wasn't just her weaponry, it was her presence. The Iowa arrived first, hit hardest, and left nothing standing. Every fleet that sailed with her gained a new kind of confidence. They knew that if the Iowa was there, they were going to win. By late 1944, she wasn't just a ship anymore, she was a symbol of American resolve, of ingenuity, of sheer willpower. Wherever she went, she carried a simple truth. The U.S. Navy had built the most dangerous warship on Earth, and she was unstoppable. Even after the war, her reputation would echo through time, a reminder of an era when steel ruled the seas, and courage carried the day. The USS Iowa had not only survived World War II, she had defined it, and her legend was only beginning. By 1945, the Pacific was in flames. The Japanese Empire, once unstoppable, was crumbling under the relentless advance of Allied forces. Every island taken brought the war closer to Japan's heart, and leading that charge was the USS Iowa, the spearhead of America's naval power. She had already earned her reputation. Now she was about to prove it one last time. The Iowa joined Task Force 58, a massive fleet of carriers, cruisers, and destroyers preparing for the Okinawa campaign, the bloodiest naval battle of the entire war. The mission was simple but brutal: break Japan's final line of defense. From the moment she arrived, the sky itself seemed to turn against her. Waves of Japanese aircraft, many flown by kamikaze pilots, hurled themselves at the fleet in a desperate bid to halt the invasion. The Iowa's radar screens lit up with blips, dozens of enemy planes closing in. Alarms blared, sirens screamed, and the deck erupted into chaos. Within seconds, her anti-aircraft guns opened fire. Dozens of Bofors and Oerlikons unleashed walls of tracer fire that lit up the night sky. The air turned to thunder, a storm of steel and flame. Kamikazes fell in burning spirals, crashing into the sea mere yards away. The heat scorched the deck, smoke filled the air, but the Iowa never faltered. Every man aboard knew what was at stake. If they fell, the invasion could fail. But they stood their ground, hour after hour, day after day. And when the smoke cleared, the Iowa was still there, defiant and unbroken. Her massive 16-inch guns then turned toward the shore. For days, she bombarded Okinawa's coastal fortifications, pulverizing enemy strongholds, tunnels, and artillery nests. The sound of her guns echoed across the island, a sound that soldiers on land called the voice of God. Each bombardment was a masterpiece of coordination. Spotter planes guided her fire, relaying targets through radio as the Iowa's gunners adjusted their aim. The results were devastating. Bunkers vaporized, airfields vanished. Even the earth itself seemed to tremble beneath her assault. But the battle came at a cost. The sea was littered with burning wrecks and the air smelled of salt, oil, and smoke. Men aboard Iowa worked through exhaustion, surviving on adrenaline and sheer determination. They had become part of something larger, something eternal. Then, as the war neared its end, Iowa received a new order to escort USS Missouri, where the final surrender of Japan would be signed. It was a fitting conclusion. The two Iowa-class sisters, forged from the same steel and spirit, sailed together one last time, one bearing the scars of war, the other carrying peace. On September 2, 1945, aboard the Missouri in Tokyo Bay, the world finally exhaled. Japan's leaders signed the surrender documents and World War II was over. The guns of the Iowa fell silent. The sea was still. For the men who had served on her, it was a bittersweet victory. They had seen hell and survived it. Their ship, their home, had carried them through fire and fury. Some wept, some cheered, and some simply stared out at the horizon, unable to believe it was truly over. The USS Iowa had fought from the Atlantic to the Pacific, through storm and battle, through fear and triumph. She never ran, never faltered, never failed. Her decks were scarred, her paint burned, her guns worn blunt, but she remained unbroken. A survivor, a warrior, a legend. As she sailed home to port, flags waving, the men aboard her knew one thing for certain. They had served on the most dangerous warship of World War II, and she had earned every bit of that title. In fire and glory, the guns had gone silent, the world had changed. When the final echoes of World War II faded across the Pacific, the USS Iowa returned home, victorious, yet weary. Her steel hull bore the scars of 1,000 storms, her deck stained by salt and smoke. But to the men who walked her corridors, she was more than a machine. She was family, a guardian, a living legend. In the months following the war, the Iowa sailed triumphantly into American ports. Crowds gathered along the shorelines, waving flags, cheering as the mighty battleship came home. For a moment, she was a symbol of everything the nation had fought for: strength, courage, and freedom. But peace, ironically, became her new enemy. As the world entered the atomic age, the great battleships and once kings of the sea began to fade from military relevance. Aircraft carriers now ruled the oceans. Missiles replaced guns. Speed and stealth overtook armor and firepower. The Iowa, despite her unmatched record, was no exception. By 1949, she was placed into the reserve fleet, silent, moored in still waters, her great cannons pointing toward a horizon that no longer needed them. The sea that once trembled at her approach now passed her by without notice. And yet, legends never truly sleep. When the Korean War erupted in 1950, the call came once more. The Iowa awoke. Her turbines roared to life again, her decks filled with sailors, and her guns thundered across the Korean coastline. For the first time since 1945, she returned to battle, a ghost from another age bringing devastation upon a new enemy. Her 16-inch shells tore through enemy positions, rail lines, and fortresses with terrifying precision. Each bombardment reminded the world that the old giants of World War II still had fire in their hearts. Soldiers on shore described the sound of her guns as a hammer striking the earth itself. Even in this new era, the Iowa proved she could adapt. Her radar systems were upgraded, her communications modernized, and her defenses improved. She became more than a relic. She became a bridge between two generations of warfare. Throughout the 1950s, she served as both a weapon and a diplomat. She carried presidents, hosted foreign leaders, and represented American power at ports across the globe. Her presence alone could calm tensions or send warnings, a reminder that while America sought peace, it was always prepared for war. But time, relentless as the sea, moved on. By the late 1950s, the Iowa once again found herself at rest. Technology was advancing too fast. The Cold War was being fought in the air and beneath the waves, not on the surface of the sea. Missiles, satellites, and submarines now defined global power. For decades she slept, silent but never forgotten. Then came the 1980s, an era of military renewal. As tensions with the Soviet Union reignited, America turned once again to its old giants. Under President Ronald Reagan's 600-ship Navy program, the Iowa was reactivated, modernized with Tomahawk cruise missiles, Harpoon anti-ship missiles, and Phalanx CIWS defense systems. The transformation was astonishing. The same ship that had fought Japan's Imperial Navy now carried computerized weaponry capable of striking targets hundreds of miles away. Her decks were refitted, her systems rewired, her engines tuned. The Iowa was reborn, half battleship, half missile platform, a fusion of old steel and new technology. And once again, she took to the seas, this time as a symbol of Cold War deterrence. She patrolled international waters, participated in NATO exercises, and represented the raw, enduring strength of the United States Navy. Her very presence reminded the world that power isn't just built, it's earned and remembered. The sailors who served aboard her during this era spoke of a strange pride, of walking the same decks as the heroes of World War II, manning the same turrets, feeling the same vibrations beneath their feet. The Iowa wasn't just a ship anymore. She was a living timeline of American naval history. When she was finally decommissioned for the last time in the early 1990s, it wasn't because she had failed, it was because she had done everything she was ever built to do. She had outlasted enemies, eras, and entire generations of ships. Her guns may have fallen silent once more, but her name still echoed across the oceans she once ruled. The USS Iowa had become more than the most dangerous warship of World War II. She had become a monument to power itself, a reminder that steel can rust but legends never die. Time moves on. Wars end. Empires fall and the heroes of history fade into memory. But some stories never die. They echo through generations, carried not by words but by legacy. The USS Iowa is one of those stories. Today she rests quietly in the harbor of Los Angeles, no longer slicing through waves at 30 knots, no longer shaking the ocean with thunder. Instead, she stands as a monument, a colossal guardian of history, a living museum where visitors can walk the same steel decks once trodden by warriors of the sea. Her paint may have dulled, her turrets cold, but when you stand beside her and you still feel it. That energy, that silent strength, that unshakable presence that once commanded oceans. Every bolt, every rivet, every scar in her hull tells a story of young men who braved storms and gunfire, of nights filled with fear and courage, of battles that shaped the course of the modern world. She represents more than just America's naval might. She embodies an era when courage met technology, when innovation meant survival, and when unity could change the world. The USS Iowa is more than a ship. She is a time capsule of human determination. Visitors who walk her decks today can still peer into the gun turrets that once spat fire across the Pacific. They can see the cramped bunks where sailors slept between battles, the command bridge where decisions of life and death were made, and the very spots where shells the size of cars were hoisted, aimed and unleashed. For veterans, standing aboard her again is like stepping back in time. They remember the vibration of her engines, the deafening roar of her guns, the salt spray on their faces. They remember the brotherhood, the fear, and the pride. For younger generations, she is a lesson that peace is never free, and that strength, when guided by purpose, can change history. Even in silence, the Iowa continues to serve. She educates, inspires, and reminds us of the cost of freedom. Her decks echo with the laughter of schoolchildren, the solemn footsteps of veterans, and the quiet awe of those who realize they are standing before something truly immortal. And perhaps that's what makes her the most dangerous warship. Not her firepower, not her armor, not even her victories. It's the fact that she still commands respect, still ignites pride, still stirs something deep within every soul that sees her. Because the Iowa was never just a weapon, she was a promise that no matter how dark the world became, there would always be those who stood ready to fight for light. From the fury of World War II to the uncertainty of the Cold War, and now into the quiet peace of the modern age, she remains unbroken, a titan asleep beneath the California sun, her legacy shining brighter than ever. Her story ends not with destruction but with remembrance, not with silence, but with echoing pride. The USS Iowa, the sea's unstoppable giant, the thunder of freedom, and the eternal symbol of American courage, has sailed her final mission. But her name, carved into the history of mankind, will never be forgotten.